Hey everybody, thanks for joining me today. So, did ancient Chinese scientists know about entropy? Short answer, and not to waste your time with a clickbaity title. No, obviously, right? Entropy itself as a term is from 19th century thermodynamics, right? So, a scholar in 600 or 300 BC China probably isn't going to know anything about 19th century thermodynamics taking place in, quote unquote, the West. Interestingly, a lot of philosophies and a lot of metaphorical concepts do relate to entropy, especially in Chinese philosophy, especially in Taoist philosophy. So, for example, have you ever watched a tree lose its leaves and fall and felt just a little sad? And yet, without that falling, spring couldn't come. This kind of wisdom you see in Taoism is about life not fighting death. It's about understanding the rhythm between what rises and what fades. And so, again, as we ask ourselves, did ancient Chinese scientists know about entropy? Well, they definitely saw things in their own life grow and decay. So, let's talk about something that sounds scientific: entropy and negentropy, essentially the opposite of entropy. It's one of these paired forces like antimatter and matter, for example. And so in science, entropy is the idea that things naturally move from order to disorder. You could imagine a room getting messier over time or simply a hot cup of tea cooling down. Negentropy is the opposite of this. It's order growing out of disorder. You could think of like a baby being born or a seed growing into a tree, your mind learning something new. Now, in Taoism, we do not call these things good or bad. That's more of a Western metaphysical construction, like concept of these two things. For example, God is the perfect good, with Satan being his foil as the perfect evil. Whereas in Taoism and broader Chinese philosophy, you obviously see the yin yang with a drop of both in each. Although that could be a whole other discussion um, for how Christianity and Western philosophy in general and Taoism have some disagreements, perhaps. So instead, in Taoism, we might call them yin and yang. And yin is the soft, slow dissolving, and yang is bright, bold, and rising. Entropy is like yin, the quiet returning, the crumbling, the cooling of that coffee cup or tea. Whereas negentropy is like yang, that spark, the growth of that sapling into a tree, of a seed into a sapling. But what we learn from our Taoism is that both are actually important and both are needed. You see, in a forest, old trees fall and decay. That's entropy. But from that decay comes the nutrients for new life. That's negentropy. If nothing ever broke down, nothing could ever be eaten up and used to grow anything new. Entropy is not the enemy, it's merely a part of the ensemble. Similarly, negentropy is growth, but growth is not always peaceful. Sometimes it's wild and chaotic. Think of a hurricane. Those grow, so do fires, and so do cancers. And so when growth forgets its place, and when growth forgets that it needs a balance, it becomes dangerous. So even growth, when out of rhythm, can cause suffering. Taoism teaches that the universe is not made of winners and losers, but of cycles. Things rise and things fall. Babies are born. Trees grow tall, and someday they fall too. It is not a failure, it's part of the way, the Tao. Entropy reminds us to let go. Negentropy invites us to begin again. The Tao holds them both, though, the source of both of these things. And that's why we see it's not an enemy, it's part of the ensemble. because they're both ultimately from the same source. So we could reject one outright wholly, but in doing that, we also reject some aspect of ourselves to grow from. Taoism loves using water as a metaphor. And so if you think of a river, the water moves fast in some places, and this can cut out entire canyons, right? And that's yang, that's neg entropy, shaping the world. But still, we can find water that slows, and it pools, and it softens. And that's yin, that's entropy, bringing stillness and silence and reflection. A healthy river needs both, and so do we. In your own life, you've seen this. When you're always going, always grinding, eventually you burn out, and too much yang, and you become fire with no fuel. But if you give up and you stop moving, you stop caring, entropy takes over. You fade into the stillness with no spark, nothing that gives the life its luster. And so Taoism tells us do not cling too hard to either. Learn to feel the rhythm. Sometimes you'll need rest, and sometimes you'll need action. And both are okay. Entropy and neg entropy, death and life, letting go and starting anew. They're not your enemies, and they're not enemies of one another. They're companions. If you can learn to flow between them, to rise when it's time to rise and to rest when it's time to rest, then you are walking the Tao. Not chasing good, not running away from evil, just following the way like a leaf on the wind.